Rain hammered the streets, relentless and cold. A strange customer stepped into the pharmacy, shivering against the storm. He was a mess, honestly. He asked for an omega inhibitor spray, leaving the saleswoman completely stunned. He didn't care if it was a spray or an injection, he just needed it now. She shook her head. They didn't stock those. Besides, the law here is strict no selling restricted meds through back channels. As that sank in, the poor guy looked totally crushed. The girl behind the counter started panicking, not knowing what to do. She scrambled to suggest alternatives, but it was useless. Then, someone else walked through the door, a handsome, sharp-dressed man. Fate played a cruel trick as the stranger's legs gave out, sending him stumbling straight at the newcomer. Strong hands caught him before he hit the floor. A calm voice advised caution, but that wasn't what mattered. He was fixated on the scent, a rich, unmistakable alpha aroma. He didn't stay to chat, bolting back out into the freezing rain. He looked like a drowned rat, not caring about the storm at all. The girl stared after him, confused. She shrugged when asked about the guy, just some pathetic, sickly stranger who clearly wasn't doing well. She knew the other customer, Mr. Lyon, quite well. She joked that his obsession with those medicinal pills wasn't exactly a balanced diet. She warned him pills aren't food. Lyon knew that, but he was stubborn when it came to his routine. Just then a message popped up from a little boy. He was bragging about his day and demanding pizza. Lyon sighed, typing back a reminder he'd already stuffed himself at dinner, and pizza was just junk food anyway. The girl's curiosity finally won out. She asked if he knew anything about omega inhibitors. Lyon looked blank. She told him the stranger had been desperate for one, even though the name sounded like gibberish to her. Lyon dismissed it, sensing the guy had been hammered. He'd practically reeked of cheap booze. Regardless, he asked for the nearest pizza place. Watching him go, the girl realized he wasn't as cold as he seemed. Still, it was a damn shame a guy like that had married off so young. Outside, the rain poured on. Suddenly, a figure darted into the street against the red light, ignoring the traffic. A miracle saved him from being crushed, but his pizza hit the pavement, ruined. It was that same drunk guy, staring straight at Lyon. He was on the edge of a total breakdown. If things kept spiraling like this, he was going to be desperate. He had no choice but to beg. In the chaos of the city, for a second, it felt like the world had narrowed down to just the two of them. The overwhelming smell of alcohol hit Lyon. He assumed the guy was sick. When he offered help, the man brushed it off. Lyon suggested a hospital, but the stranger shook his head, begging to be taken home instead. But he didn't mean his own place. He needed a hotel somewhere he could check in with his own ID. Something was wrong with his apartment, and he knew they'd never let him in. He was falling apart by the second. Lyon tried to insist on the hospital, but the guy suddenly swayed, his eyes rolling back as he started to black out. He whispered to leave him be right before he passed out cold. Then, Lyon assistant pulled up, eyes widening at the scene. Lyon ordered him to dump the guy at a 5-star hotel under his name. He had other things to handle first, but the stranger wasn't out yet. He grabbed onto them, terrified, begging them not to walk away. Lyon ignored the plea, pulling out his phone. It was his housekeeper, calling to ask if he'd be home tonight. Little Tong Tong was throwing a fit, refusing to sleep until his father came home. Lyon looked baffled. Why was the kid waiting up? He told her to just put the kid to bed. She explained Tong had aced his exams and was dying for his father approval. The poor kid was scared he'd somehow messed up. They finally passed the phone over so the boy would settle down. While the call connected, Lyon barked one last order to his assistant, get that stranger into a room. The boy called him uncle, repeating that the auntie said his dad wasn't mad. The man confirmed it gently. He told the kid to call him father, promising to be home as soon as he wrapped things up. It had been a long day. The boy needed his rest. But wait, there was more. Tong had a school paper that needed a signature for tomorrow morning. They agreed to leave it for the auntie to sign. Finally, the boy went to sleep. Even after the call, the assistant hung back, watching the stranger. The guy looked barely conscious, forcing him to ask where the closest hotel actually was. They got to the room, and the stranger was unceremoniously dumped onto the bed. Lyon loomed over him. He demanded answers. What the hell was this guy's game? The man sat up trembling and whispered a single word: pheromones. Lyon wasn't in the mood for games. He needed to know who sent this man and why he felt so uneasy. Refusing a sick man wouldn't be right, but honestly, it was wild how this guy didn't make excuses. Pulling this kind of cheap act in front of me? His look was tempting, but I don't buy it. I figured the foreign bidders were just playing their usual shady games to get an edge. But this? Totally over the line. Still, he claimed he didn't want my money. Who really sent him? I told him to go back and warn them. If they want a rivalry, fine, but these theatrics are done. Otherwise, don't blame me if I take their offer and have some fun. I turned to leave that spy behind, or whatever he was. But the stranger wouldn't let me off that easily. He grabbed me, insisting he had no agenda, no hidden motives, and absolutely no interest in my money. All he wanted were my pheromones. I had zero patience for that, so I swatted his hand away. But when I turned, his gaze was intense, fierce enough to pin me right against the wall. I realized this guy had no shame. Yet even there, he wasn't about to give up on his desire. His grip on my throat softened. I noticed the touch and instinctively backed off. But at that point, nothing mattered. I felt his scent fading. Wait, was I dealing with a beta? A strange wave of emotion hit me. Maybe being with a beta would actually quiet the chaos inside? I asked how much he'd had to drink. Instead of answering, he just begged me to touch him again. Ever since I awakened, I knew I needed an alpha. Not a model, just someone who could actually handle being around me. Someone who didn't recoil at my scent. Someone I could build a real, caring life with. My awakening was late. It didn't start until after uni. They said it came from my mom, a truly gentle omega. She and my dad, her advisor, were a love story written in science. She once told me that she'd lived as a beta until she was 24. If she'd known she was an omega, she might have quit her studies. And then she never would have found her soulmate. Once you wake up, you're forced to hunt for your alpha. Apparently, only high compatibility pairs can keep the flame alive. Hearing that, I was hooked. I wondered if omegas were really just chained to alphas, especially since so many betas avoid marriage. Dad just said I'd get it later. My first blind date was with an alpha, a friend of my father's acquaintance. He smelled like roses. Honestly, from Dad's point of view, the guy was talkative and pretty decent. A perfect marriage prospect. He even told me my scent was uniquely attractive. He didn't hesitate to hand over his number, practically begging me to call. That night, I called my friend. She wanted the scoop. I told her the pheromones were too much and the guy was just uncomfortable. We planned to talk later. I figured I'd need some suppressants, but my head was spiraling. Then, out of nowhere, a blinding light hit the window. Everything went black. I couldn't reach my friend. I woke up in the middle of the road, totally lost, with no clue how I got there. I just needed a pharmacy, but nobody understood what I was asking for. Finally, this man showed up. That night, after a shower, Lyon stepped out. The person from my nightstand was still there. I didn't plan on staying for breakfast. I headed to my car. At least I had his name time to have my guys track him down. I finally got home. The woman there acted like I'd been drinking, which was a lie. I asked if the kid was asleep. She said Tong passed out right after we talked and left those papers on the table. He wanted his father to see them tonight. The boy didn't want his aunt signing, so it stayed on the table. If Dad didn't show, she could handle it in the morning. We wrapped up the paperwork fast. Master mentioned we'd need to handle the residency registration soon. The kid had been here 2 years, but adoption laws kept us waiting until I hit 30 last week. Now, it was finally time to make it official. I woke up in the silence totally alone. Honestly, it was a relief to think I'd hit it off with a beta. An alpha would just make things messy. That same morning, the boy slept in a bit and was stunned to see his father home. He was so happy, he didn't leave his side. He didn't hesitate a second, greeting him properly as father. Aunt said Master checked his grades. Next time, he had to include his surname. Tun eagerly agreed, then asked if father had time for breakfast together. It was true. The man handled all the paperwork, so soon Tun would be officially registered here. They were even having dinner out tonight. They were going to visit grandfather, just like Aunt mentioned once the documents were finalized. He'd never met the man, which made him feel pretty nervous. Still, father told him not to call that man grandfather. He needed to hurry. Just then, he got a message that Shen had left the hotel. So he ordered his people to watch him like a hawk, tracking every move and noting everyone he met today. Our protagonist asked the taxi driver to take him to Lyon Street. The driver never even heard of it, asking if it was in another town. He wasn't keen on driving far with his shift ending. When asked where they were, the driver looked surprised. He said they were in City Eye. Based on his passenger's condition and the strong scent, he figured the kid was drunk. He immediately warned him that if he threw up, he'd pay extra for cleaning. Chen had no choice but to hop out. Since the driver couldn't take him and hadn't heard of the place, he was totally lost on where to go. That same day, negotiations were heating up at the office. Suddenly, right in the middle of it, the manager got a call. He decided to ignore it, but the phone kept ringing. Someone was being incredibly persistent. Eventually, they wrapped up the meeting. But the employees were already whispering Director Lyon had, for the first time ever, let 2 calls and a text distract him from a meeting. This could only mean one thing: their director finally fell in love. Anyway, the man now had a chance to find out why this person collapsed in the street. After leaving the taxi, it turned out he started asking locals for directions, looking for a specific spot, but he passed out before he could get far. Chen was still out cold. Preliminary medical results suggested a fever, though they were still waiting on blood tests. Lyon asked if they'd managed to find out anything about the man himself, but they had zero info on his identity. Lyon concluded that Shen probably took great care to cover his tracks just to end up in his bed. It would be strange if they uncovered everything so easily. He just asked to be kept in the loop. A while later, as planned, he and the boy went to dinner where they were being awaited. It was the kid's first time here, but the staff treated him so warmly. Still, he was too shy to reciprocate, preferring to stay close to his guardian. Finally, they reached the host, and father told his son to greet Mr. Chen. The older man stayed silent for a second, scrutinizing them with a stern gaze, wondering why this man was called Chen. The boy greeted him hesitantly. The man just told him to come closer. Reluctantly, Tong obeyed. Seeing how uneasy he was, the host couldn't keep his stern act up. To lighten the mood, he offered some snacks. When asked his name, father answered for him, introducing him as Kan Tong. The elder's expression darkened, realizing Lyon was speaking for the boy. Determined not to show fear, The kid formally introduced himself. The host remarked that young boys should have more confidence, and though Tong was small, he had no reason to hide behind adults. The anxious child thanked him, saying he understood. To dispel the last of his fear, Father gave him a gentle smile. Finally, Chen turned to his guest, mentioning that Ninsu would return the day after tomorrow. Lyon already knew. He was planning to meet her then. Seeing they agreed, the elder carelessly assured him that if she proved troublesome, he wouldn't intervene. While the adults discussed business, the boy had to wait. The day wore him out. He felt drowsy. Suddenly, Tong did something unexpected. He peeled some nuts and offered them to the host. Chen thought the boy was thoughtful, but it just deepened his sadness. Maybe he was clever, but he couldn't compare to his own late son. This really shocked Tong, making his body tremble. The man who called himself his father didn't comment, just gave him a gentle embrace. Just then, the lady of the house appeared. Surprised to hear they had guests, she wondered why no one told her. She knew the kid was named Tong, but he didn't know who she was, so Father explained she was Lady Chen. She clearly didn't like the title, telling the boy to just call her Aunt. The man remarked that her manners must be lacking if she ignored proper titles of respect. She didn't care about rules, letting the kid call her whatever. Dinner was served. Tong tried using the cutlery properly, but man, those utensils were a real struggle. He wouldn't quit, though, and honestly, I noticed his effort. Then suddenly, the older man asked if he was in school. His father confirmed elementary school. Chen teased him for being a big kid who couldn't use a fork. Awkward silence. You could see it on the boy's face. He was hurt. Lyon's mood shifted, explaining he'd been too busy working to teach him. Seeing those tears well up, the man handed him a napkin right away. That little bit of kindness helped. She loved watching them bond. Lyon just cut the meat so the kid could relax. While sipping wine, Tong asked if it tasted like his drink. It made him think. Meanwhile, Shen was out cold, hooked to IVs, haunted by dreams of last night. A loud voice calling his name, Lian Zhai, shocked him awake. He demanded an office meeting after dinner. But no matter what, he kept wondering how that person was doing. Left alone, the boy just wanted to go home. The grown-ups were boring him to death. Lady Chen caught his eye, teasing him not to call her old. Thinking it over, Tong called her big sister, but remembered his aunt said only moms are aunts, so he asked if she had kids. She explained her husband, Chen Chulian, really wanted a family, but they ran into some medical issues along the way. The kid didn't get it, so she quickly pivoted back to the food, sparing him the talk. She said it was delicious and invited him to have the driver bring him back any time, since his dad was always busy. The boy looked sad. She asked if he feared Chen Chunlian, but promised he was just strict like his dad, not actually a bad person at all. No need to worry, he might not even see him. Tong knew his dad wasn't like that guy. Beneath that cold shell, his father wasn't harsh. He was actually incredibly gentle. By the time they hit the road, the boy was out, carried to bed. A message pinged his phone, ruining the vibe. His subordinate hadn't expected a call, but Lyon only cared about Shen. Tests showed no major issues, just weirdly high hormone levels. Cause unknown. Maybe drugs? Hard to say. Initial screens were clean, but they needed a deep blood analysis. Also, they questioned if Shen was even drinking, since the test showed 0 alcohol. The doctor started an IV and promised to check on Shen again later that evening. If the fever held, they'd need a hospital run. Watching him sleep, Lian's mind was racing. He sent his guy away, and once they were finally alone, Lyon told him to quit faking it and like magic, the guy's eyes snapped open. Seeing who it was, our guy kept playing dead, but the jig was totally up. No point in lying anymore. He spotted an ID card. Lyon told him to get up, and finally, he realized he had no clue where he was. He barely remembered the street. He gave a quick thanks for being saved. Looking at his messy state, Lyon told him to change. Fresh clothes were waiting. A few minutes later, he came downstairs looking sharp. He sat down and tried to talk, but Lyon cut straight to the chase. What did he want? Was it money or help with a project? Shen realized the mistake and said he was grateful, but he wasn't some scammer or traitor. Lyon asked what he actually did for a living. He couldn't answer, so Lyon assumed he was a drug-addicted escort. Shen just asked about that scent. That specific smell was super familiar, and he was dying to know what it was. He asked if the guy was a beta, which only got him a sly, knowing grin. Lyon suggested Shen. I was acting like a total kid again, trying to relive old memories. But something felt off, seriously wrong. The guy's take on beta life made 0 sense. And get this, the local pharmacy didn't even stock suppressants. 2 days in and not a single pheromone in the air. This place? It felt like a different dimension. I started suspecting my reality was glitching. Suddenly, the heat hit me hard. I sniffed the air and just blurted it out. I asked why my body felt like this and why I smelled like alcohol. He looked at me, deadpan, and asked if I was a mess. My answer? I was just going through those days. He leaned in sharp thought I was a drunk or a drug addict. I told him straight, not an addict, just going through a phase. Right then, Lyon looked at me like I'd lost my mind. He really couldn't grasp how I could say such nonsense with a straight face. Either way, the tension was through the roof. I just needed someone to help me get through this heat. But him? He couldn't have cared less about my situation. He knew an omega cycle could drag on for days. Without help, the fever alone would be enough to break anyone. Unless an alpha showed up, that torture was just something you had to endure until it finally faded away. Day 2. If I was lucky, I only had 24 hours left. Lyon just stepped out for a smoke to think. I couldn't help but follow. Sitting in that guest room alone felt impossible. Seeing how desperate I was, he finally gave in. He leaned close to study my face, wondering why I always looked so miserable, like I was some kind of lost cause. Just seeing me like that seemed to get under his skin. It was written all over his face, instant irritation. Suddenly, I couldn't hold it back. Tears started falling. He looked totally baffled, practically demanding to know what was wrong. I told him I was burning up. He pushed me away, asking if I was high or taking something. Everything I did made it look like I was looking for trouble, especially the way I kept clinging to him. In my hazy sleep, I heard him complaining that my fever wouldn't break. The first thing I saw when I woke up was him. He was annoyed again, telling me I'd crawled into the tub and passed out for half the day. Memories slammed into me, including how the night ended. He even mentioned helping me wash, like it was nothing. So yeah, no reason to be embarrassed. He acted like there was no risk of pregnancy anyway. But I knew the truth. An omega could definitely conceive with an alpha. Sure, with a beta. The odds are low, but still not 0. But he didn't exactly seem like your average beta. I had to know. I asked him if he was sure nothing would happen. That stopped him dead in his tracks. He blamed the fever for clouding my judgment. That was the last thing I heard. Sleep pulled me under again. By morning, a knock on the door dragged me back to reality. Breakfast was waiting. I woke up to find new clothes laid out for me. There was even a price tag still attached. A bit awkward. No time to overthink it. Someone was waiting in the hall. They checked my temperature first. Looked like I was finally cooling down. The woman in the room wasn't someone I knew, and she immediately started typing something into her phone. She got a voice message right back from the boss. Tell him to check again, but use a mercury thermometer this time. She let out a long breath, clearly relieved. She told me the master left orders before his meeting. They had to track my vitals by 8 a.m. sharp. Since I was stable, she shifted gears, asking if I was in any pain. We could hit the hospital by 9 if things got worse. But I felt fine. So we headed to breakfast to talk. I asked for a moment to clear the air. During that quick chat, the pieces finally clicked into place. My suspicions were confirmed. This wasn't my world anymore. Here, there were only two genders, men and women. Power didn't care about alpha status. Maybe that accident wasn't just an accident. Maybe I actually died. If that's true, what about my friend? The one I was talking to right before everything went black? I bet he's beating himself up. And that alpha, the one who triggered this whole nightmare? I wanted him to pay. What about my parents? They were so proud of me. God, how are they handling this back home? The housekeeper told me a car was waiting. I had to move. The driver was one of Lyon's own people. He was only there to drop me off. A while later, he called his boss to report that I was acting weird. I gave him an address, but apparently it doesn't even exist in this city. He tried to get answers, but I couldn't help him. I had no idea where I lived. Nothing. We were both stuck in a dead end. They searched the whole country, and that address was nowhere to be found. It was a complete mystery. The plan changed. They were taking me to a psych ward. I called Lyon from there, screaming that I wasn't crazy. They warned him not to play games, insisting he take the test. The boss was certain Shen was losing his mind. His right-hand man dug through the results, hoping for a shred of good news. Nothing. The mood stayed ice cold. I tried suggesting the medical gear might be glitchy, but get this, the stuff was made by their own company. Top-tier, industry-leading tech. That excuse was dead on arrival. No chance of a malfunction. That corporate pride is something else they trust. Their own brand above all else. So, back we went to the estate. The whole trip for that exam was a total bust. The boss wanted me dragged back so he could see the mess himself. Then the driver announced the new plan. Shen was staying put until his memory kicked back in. That was the moment it really hit me. I was in deep. I realized the money and IDs were all wrong, totally alien to me. Integration was off the table. Even if I could fake it, my cash would dry up in a week. I had no choice but to play along with this farce. Meanwhile, Lyon was at the airport, eyes on a familiar face. But wait, she wasn't due back until tomorrow. He wondered if she'd talked to their dad yet. Nope, she wanted to keep it a surprise. She was bundled up like a bear, complaining it was way too hot. Then suddenly, the girl next to her nudged Ninsai for an intro. It was her friend and her fiancé. One look at him, a cold, sharp glare, and she folded, admitting it was just a joke. That guy was actually her older brother. In the car, she finally saw the kid she'd heard so much about. She teased him, saying she'd forgotten his face. Dad sent a photo, sure, but he looked totally different in person. When she asked if they were heading home, her face darkened. Was that woman still there? She was shocked the old man hadn't kicked her out yet. Tong knew exactly who they meant, the beautiful lady he just met. Honestly, he kind of liked her laugh. Ninsai demanded lunch, sick of airplane food. At the restaurant, it hit her. Dad still had no clue she was back. She figured she'd crash at her brother's place outside the city, but Lyon shut that down fast. Not convenient, he said, because of his friend. She knew exactly what he meant by friend. She wouldn't let it go, but Lyon kept a poker face. Why no girlfriend, she pressed. Too much work, he claimed. No time for that. Time dragged on, and I realized I'd drifted off. It was late. Pretty sure no one was dropping by now. Starving, I raided the fridge packed with expensive high-end stuff. But all I could think about was the guy who owned this place and why he was running so late.